thank you very much for joining today. In this webinar, we're going to explore the modern age of data processing with data flow and how to switch from the VMF system, the legacy system, to data flow. So first of all, I want to check that you can hear me and us and see us as well. If there are any issues with that, please let us know in the chat. You can also use the chat, obviously, to ask your questions, and we're going to reply to them as we go. We will also have some time at the end of the webinar to take some live questions. And the webinar is recorded as usual. So if there is anything that you're missing, that you didn't understand or whatever, you will be always able to go back to it later. So for today, we are two here as your hosts, myself, Anna Walter, as the product manager of ClicData, and I have Lotta Shuku with me, who is our sales engineer, fresh arrived in Toronto, Canada. And he's gonna be our expert for the transitioning today.
Thank you.
Okay, so on the agenda, first of all, we're going to talk about how and why we move and when we move from VMF to data flow and what it is we're talking about. Then we're going to talk about all the resources that are available for you to use to do that, and some tips and for organizing, etc. And then we have time for a demo for different use cases where you can see how to do this transition, and then time for some questions at the end. So first of all, let's talk about the first section here, why we're going from VMF to data flow, and what is good about it. First of all, what are VMFs? So VMF is the short, cute name for views, merges, and fusions. It's our legacy ETL system. So we have three objects, or we used to have three objects only, which were called merge, fusion, and view. And each of them would actually process the data in a certain way. Merges would be the replacement for a join in SQL, fusion the replacement for a union, and view all the rest, like filtering, grouping, aggregations, parsing, splitting, pivoting, and so much more. And all of these objects would work together, right? You could have a merge based on a fusion, which is based on a data source, and then maybe used in a view, etc. And all the data processing would go through these three objects. So that was working fine per se, but we encountered many problems actually with the system, with this legacy VMF system. First of all, the main issue was that it's very unclear to understand the dependencies between these objects because they are all placed in the same explorer, the tables and views explorer. And unless you are you have a very good naming convention of explaining which element flows into which next. If you have a view maybe based on the fusion, and then based on another view, if you name them correctly, like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, then maybe you have a good overview of what's going on, but most probably it's not the case. We know all of that. We've been there. It's difficult to keep a good naming convention for this kind of elements, and moreover, if you have a complex flow, like you can see in the example here on the screen. So that's the first problem, right? It's this overview, which is totally unclear. The other problem is actually performance of the data processed through this ETL system. Why? It's because actually all these views, merges, and fusions, they would not process the data and store it into a table. They would actually only query the source table, which is at the beginning of the flow. And if you have a dashboard, which is then using one of these VMFs, which goes through many transformations before going to the dashboard, every time someone would display a dashboard, the engine would actually go through all the queries to the source data and process the data as you look at the dashboards. So obviously, if you have large data sets, if you have many complicated transformations, many steps of transformations, heavy transformations on the SQL Server environments, it will take time to load on the dashboard, which makes a very poor user experience for your end users. And to address that performance issues, we have introduced something else called caching, and that would allow that to choose on any step of your flow which elements would be actually cached into a physical table in the database. So that's a good solution, but it actually came with other issues, because if you have a complex flow and you have caching at different steps of that flow, each cache needs to wait for the previous cache to load and to process before processing itself. So we actually end up with a very long time to process data, especially when you have large data sets. And in the end, your dashboard will still suffer from these very long data upgrades, data processing, sorry. So that's why we decided to move to another solution, and the solution is called Dataflow. So Dataflow is now a ETL tool. It's a module per se. It's separate from the tables and views, and you can use that to do all the data processing. So very simply speaking, if you haven't seen Dataflow yet, it's at least what you see on the screen. It's at least one input table and one output table and some transformations in the middle. So the data input table is a table that comes from your source, data source, maybe directly after a connection, right? You have connected to a data source and you have imported table. And that table is now used as an input table for your data flow. And then you add different nodes of transformations. In this example, we have a filter, then we have a calculated column, and then we have some operations to fix data and to clean it out. And then this data is processed into another type of node, which is called the output table node. And this is where the transformed data will be stored. And this table is actually a physical table in your database. So that's the main huge difference with the previous the legacy system with the VMS, where we actually would not have a processed table at the end of the flow. So there are multiple benefits which come with Dataflow. So first of all, you have a very good overview of what's going on with the data, where the data is coming in, how it's aggregated together, if there are different sources. And you get a visual, very clear overview of what's going on. And you can also manage multiple input tables, multiple output tables in the same data flow. You can also add annotations and the color boxes to organize your data, like you can see here in this example on the screen. This is a large flow where you can see there's a lot of different inputs, and then they all flow together into different join nodes, which are then outputted into, I think, two data outputs. And so it's very clearly represented in just one data flow. And the other interesting benefit of data flow is that the data process will only be processed when you choose to do it. So when you run it, when you execute your data flow. Other than that, data flow is now also offering more features than VMF has ever done. So for example, we have nodes that use AI to process data, for example, to do sentiment analysis or to just query your data using AI. So it's very powerful and just interesting to explore. And we're also adding more nodes in the future. And there are also some operations that would take many transformation nodes in a view, and they now just take one operation, one node in data flow. So overall, it's a very clear optimization of your workflow. And everyone who has gone from the legacy VMF to Dataflow have given very good feedback on Dataflow and really love it. So now what's happening with VMF? It's been now 2 more years that Dataflow is on par with everything what VMF used to do in terms of features. And it means it's now time to sunset VMF. So in March 2026, we're going to end the support for VMF, meaning that on the support channels, the tickets and the chat, questions to manipulate data VMF, are not going to be supported anymore. But of course, if you need help to transition to Dataflow, this is still possible, and the support team is going to be happy to help you. So don't worry about that. The next big milestone is going to be in September. So from that date on, it's not going to be possible anymore to create a new VMF, so a new view, a new merge, or a new fusion, whether it's a creation from scratch or it's a copy. Still existing VMFs will continue to work, so don't worry. Everything that is set up is going to continue to work as before. And then the next big milestone is going to be the end of VMF, really, where we're going to remove all these objects from the account, so they are not going to be working anymore. They will not exist anymore. So at this time, so it's in more than 1 year, everything will have to be transitioned to Dataflow. So what does it mean exactly? if we look at this very simple example here, where we have an ETL, a legacy ETL, using 2 data sources, then which are flowing into a view and then a fusion and then a view, which is then used in a dashboard and a report, you are going to transform this example into something like this. So the data sources stay the same, right? We don't touch them. It's merely the views, fusion, and view, which are going to be transformed into one data flow. And the data flow will then output the data into an output table. So that's the new element here, the output table. And this is then the one which is the output table is going to be the one which is going to be used in dashboards and reports. So basically, at the end of building this new ETL flow, once everything is correctly mapped, etc., the view is going to be replaced with the output table, and that's it. So we have talked with many customers in the last years to discuss the conversion to data flow and what can be done to ease this process. So we have now a toolbox of different tools that will help for auditing, and then secondly for converting. So we'll have a look at them in theory now, and then later in the demo in real. So basically, if you want to switch the data flow, you need to go through these steps. We believe that's the way to go. So first of all, you need to identify which source tables are used at all in your account. Maybe you have loaded data which you never use, so of course there's nothing to do about those. But the ones which are used and which are processed in any VMF, you need to identify them. So you have 2 ways of doing that. You have the dependency graph, which we're going to look at later, and then also you can download different tables and the marketplace data sets to see where everything is used and how. And then once you have identified which tables you want to work on, you can use the table import in data flow to convert a VMF into a data flow. So that's very simple, also just a click of a button and boom, it's done. And then rebind everything. And then at last, when you're done with everything, you need to replace your final output of the data flow instead of the previous VMFs that you had that was used in your dashboard reports, etc. So let's have a look at where to find all of these tools. So you may know that already, but just for those who don't, first of all, you have the dependency graph, which is this diagram view of the dependencies between each object in the platform. That can be accessed on any explorer, like in the tables explorer, in the dashboard explorer, in Dataflow as well. Any object has this dependency access directly on the explorer. So you click on dependencies and you get to that pop-up with the dependency graph. And on certain explorers, you also have that quick access icon there, the little red icon, the sharing icon. If it's red, it means that the object is used. That's it. So if you click that, it will just open the dependency graph. And then you have different tables that you can download and maybe load to Excel to note down what you want to work on. Can be useful. So in the marketplace tables, you have the tables and views list. This is what you have on the screen here. It's actually showing you 1 row per table in your account, and for each table you can see its name, you can see the folder where it's stored, you can see the type of data it is. So if it's a view, you can see it here, and you can see the number of dependents and the number of dependencies. So the child objects, the child data objects, and the parent data objects as well, and the number of dashboards where they're used. Very similar to this, there is also another table which is called data dependencies, which you can find also in the tables explorer. When you export, the tables at the top of your explorer, you have that little button here to export data. So the data dependency is similar to the other view we just saw before. It will just show you for each table, each dependency as well. So in this example, we can see that we have some source data tables which are used in some targets objects, which are here data views, as you can see. So this can help you really organize and see what you want to work on. It's really complementary to the dependency graph. So once you have identified which tables you want to start with, you have different options to import any VMF into Dataflow. So you have the button here you can see it on the screen at the top of your data flow, just to import one or more VMF at once into your data flow. And once it's imported, you can simply, drag a line between these different elements to just reconnect them and recreate the dependencies between them. So when you import merge into data flow, it will be imported as a table merge. So if you want to then output this data into a new output table, so you have to just create a new output table and process the data into it. Very similar to table fusion, it's the same idea. When you import a fusion into data flow, it will import it as a table fusion node. And then when you import a view, because the view has many operations in it, it will look something like this. So you will import the source table of the view as being the input table of your data flow. And then for each transformation in your view, you will have one node in data flow. And if there are nodes which are using different and secondary table inputs, like for example here in aggregation, this has been transformed into a lookup node in the data flow, and we can see that there is also the input table of that lookup in the data flow, which has been imported as well. And then all of that is finishing with an output table node. So if it's the view alone, then you can just import that and process the data and you're done. If you need to maybe add another view behind that and then just reconnect the dots, that's also possible. So that's what you're going to see in the demo later, so to make this a bit clearer. And and finally, when you're done, you have the table replacement tool, which is available in the dependency graph. So on any table that you choose, you simply click on it on the dependency graph, and then you access the table replacer. And you can say, okay, this table is now going to be replaced by this other one, and I want this to be applicable in all of these objects. So it's very similar to the rebind feature that you know already very well from dashboards and reports. It's just the other way around. You go from the data, and you choose on which dependent objects you want to replace the data with another one. So, right, so I think now we're going to the juicy parts. We're going to see the demos and the different use cases that Lotta has prepared to show you how to do this in real. So over to you, Lotta.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. Can you hear me clearly? Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to be going live into ClicData, and we're going to be seeing, I'm walking through a few cases here just to see in action within the platform, how some of these could work. So I hope my goal at the end of this, hopefully not setting the bar too low, but I hope everyone is still awake by the time we're done with this. Don't want to put everyone to sleep. But anyway, like I hope you're going to derive much value from this. So without much ado, we're just going to go right into some use cases here. So just before I get started, a few quick notes before I get into the platform and we start going into this. So first of all, just to, I'll say, reiterate on some of the things or to highlight some of the things Anna had said earlier. A good way to look at this is we're not just, it's not just a one-to-one migration. So we're not just taking a view and converting a view to a data flow, or taking a single fusion and converting that fusion to a data flow. A good way to look at this process, if you are already, or if you're one of the legacy clients and you use this legacy tools, it's an ETL migration. So you're migrating your whole ETL flow. It's a completely new way of doing ETL. So what you would find is that a number of fusions and views are being migrated into a single data flow. So it's not a one-to-one thing where one view gets migrated to a data flow, one fusion, one merge gets migrated to a data flow. You might have chains of these things getting migrated into one place. So your whole ETL layer, or your whole data cleaning and data transformation layer, is being simplified, being transformed, and being put into one place. The second thing I just wanted to highlight is that it's important to have a plan going in, a plan of attack. And so a couple of the resources that Anna shared would really help with that. So in terms of a plan of attack, a few things you might need is, so number one, you might need a list of objects. Right. So for the list of objects, you can have a list of dashboards, and those list of dashboards can be helpful in seeing. You can. A good way to do this is I can quickly share my screen here and show that. Can everyone see my screen properly? Yes. So if you navigate to ClicData, you come into your dashboards view here. You can click on Export. And when you export, you can come down here, select dashboards. You can select the format you want to download it in. Most people are familiar with Excel. Excel basically runs the whole world, financial and otherwise. So you can come in here and download that. And that list that gets downloaded when you go through this process, that list has a lot. It has a lot of information. It has information around when these dashboards were last accessed. It has information around like the number of things that depend on that dashboard, and information like that. So that's one list you might have. You can also do the same process when you go into the tables and views view within ClicData. So as an example here, if you go within ClicData, you go to your tables and views portion here. You click that export button that we had. So you go in there, click export. You have that list of tables and views. Right. And so it exports a list that has all that information for you. And so once you have those lists of objects, you can then begin to then begin to have a system of prioritization. So so for instance, from the dashboard side, you can choose to say, okay, these dashboards have not been accessed for the past year. So you can first of all do a dashboard cleanup. I want to clean up all the dashboards that I haven't used in the last 6 months, and all that. And then from the list of views, you're going to have information like how many dashboards live downstream of these views. Or you can have information like when the view was last accessed, and then you can then begin to sort and prioritize as well. That, okay, I want to begin my migration with the views that have the most numbers of dashboards depending on them. So at least you have that list, and then you're walking through this one by one. So you can get a list of objects. You can have a system of prioritization. Another thing is to have a system of verification. So when you eventually migrate a view, a merge, or a fusion to a data flow, you really want to be sure that you're having the same output from the data flow as you had from the view, which is feeding your dashboard. Now, this is not going to be all theory. I'm going to show some examples. I'll walk through some examples of this as we go on. So just a quick recap. Don't look at this as a one-to-one migration of one asset to a data flow. Look at it as an ETL migration, like a complete ETL migration of your organization's data cleaning, data processing pipeline, essentially. Have a plan of attack, have a list of objects, have a system of prioritization, have a system of verification, and then finally, the last assets in the chain. So for instance, you might have data sources feeding into a fusion. That fusion is feeding into a view. That view is feeding into a dashboard. We would usually go by the last assets in the chain there. So the view that feeds, or the final asset that feeds into the dashboard, is what we'll be migrating. So that being said, let's go into our case studies here, and then we'll go into ClicData and walk through these case studies. Okay, so this is the first case that we've prepared here. So in this case, it's the simplest scenario you might possibly run into. So, say you have your lists, you know what views you want to migrate and all, and then you're walking through migrating those into ClicData. So you might have a case like this where you have two data sources feeding into a fusion. That fusion feeds into a view, and that view feeds into a dashboard. So let's quickly go into ClicData and see how that would work. So I'm just going to go back to my shared screen here. So just to make sure, can everyone see my screen? Yeah, okay, thank you, Anna. All right, so the example I just showed you on the slide there. So, this example, two data sources fitting into a fusion, fitting into a view, fitting into a dashboard. This is what it looks like on ClicData. And how we can get here is, I have that particular view that feeds into a dashboard here. I can click on here, and this is the dependencies view that Anna talked about. So I'm going to click on dependencies, and it just shows me you could say the data lineage here, how the data flows from the data source on all the way down to my dashboard. So I can see that I have that fusion. That fusion flows into this view, and this view flows into this dashboard. And you can also navigate around within this as well. So say, for instance, I click on that fusion to see more information. I can see that the fusion has two raw data sources feeding into it. So these two data sources feed into the fusion feeds into the view goes down into the dashboard. So now let's get into moving this over to data flow. How do we go about this? So like I said, I wouldn't want to do a thing where I move this fusion to a data flow and then I move this view to a data flow. That's a lot of work. But what I could do is, so this is the last asset in the chain here. This is the last asset that gives me the final output that goes into my dashboard, which is the point of all this, bringing information from those two data sources and presenting it visually in a dashboard. So I want to migrate this call table master view into a data flow. So I'm going to come in here. That's the call table master view. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to click add to, and I'm going to say add to data flow. Okay. And you want to have a set of folders here. And I'm going to put that in my team folder. I'm going to click on add new. And one of the good things about this is that it automatically gives the data flow a name similar to the name you have here. So this is the call table master view. It's going to name this my call table master view data flow, and I'm going to save. Okay. And it directly brings me into the data flow. So what are we looking at here? So what you're seeing is we have that fusion was the fusion that fed the view was automatically brought in. So we have the fusion here. The fusion had those two raw data sources, the call table and the second call table. That was fed into the view. The view had just one transformation within. And so that was brought into the data flow as well. And then that feeds into an output table. And so just for like a little bit of comparison here, if we were to take a look, so this is the view that we migrated here, like we saw earlier. So this was the view. It was fed by this fusion. And if you look inside this view, we're going to see what this view looks like again. So it brings in the data from the fusion, has one transformation, and it provides this output. And that's what we're seeing in the data flow. And similarly, if you look at the fusion here, you would see that the fusion had those two data tables coming in. So the call table and the call table V2, right? And so if we go to the data flow, all that has been migrated in. So you have your fusion with those two data tables. It's feeding into the transformation that's being done in the view, and it's feeding into your output table. So what I want to do is I just want to come in here. I am going to enable the output table. You see that little flag there, and it's essentially telling me the output table is not set. So I'm going to select the output table I want this to be fed to. Again, you can also use the folders here to stay organized. So I have a folder already prepared. I'm going to select that folder, and I'm going to add a new table. And just like the tool did for us, I'm going to name this the call table master view. So call table master view. And I'm just going to give it a suffix of data flow output. That's just my personal system of staying organized. So I want to know that this table is the data flow output of the call table master view here. And I'm going to save that. Okay. And yes, so I'm going to save that. Everything is set. There are no flags to be worried about. I'm going to save and I'm going to run. Unsave modifications, save and execute. Okay, so I'm going to run the data flow. And as usual, in every software, you see the wheels on the bus go round and round. It does its thing. And we have our output. Now, at this point, what is usually recommended? So like I said earlier, it's important to have a plan of attack. You have your list of objects. You've probably gone through that. And now that you've done the migration to the data flow, at this stage, it gives you the row count here. So this is 20,000 rows. So it's usually important to go back to your table and view menu over there. So I'm just going to go back there. I'm going to navigate back to where we were. And this is the table I just created. So this is my data flow outputs table, my DF out. And I just want to confirm here. So this is 20,000 rows, and the view I had before was 20,000 rows. So now that gives me a good idea that, okay, I'm getting the same thing on the outputs of the data flow that I had on my view previously. And now that all that is done, we have the view feeding into a dashboard like we saw in the dependencies. So the view feeds into this dashboard, and now we can come in here and use one of those tools in the toolbox Anna had spoken about earlier, the table replacer. So I'm going to come in here, click on that icon here, replace a table with another. So this is the core table master view. I want to replace it with, and I go into the folder I had created there. So this was the folder I had created. Just want to help me stay organized, and I have my data flow outputs table. All right, I'm going to select that, and it automatically, matches the columns to the columns on the new data set. And the next thing is you click on here where it says dependent objects, and the objects that are dependent or downstream, you could say, from that item are going to be available here. I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to click replace. Okay, and voila, if you're probably quick, you probably saw the dashboard disappear from the dependency map here. And essentially what has happened is that dashboard is now being fed by the data flow outputs. So the output from that data flow now feeds this dashboard, right? And that is how it is. So that's just like a basic example. That is one of the simplest of examples on how this could work. And it just shows you how all these tools come together, right? So, you have your list of objects you want to migrate, and now you've been able to prioritize them. Maybe you want to prioritize and say, let me migrate the views with the most number of dashboards. And now that you've done that, how do you get from that particular view to the data flow? So that's what we just reviewed right now. And I'm going to go to the second case so we can see, because of course this is a demo, everything is going to go well. So, but I just want to go to the second case here so we can see what happens in case you run into any errors. So this is case number 2. Now we just have something a bit more complex here. So we have here in this example, just to quickly walk you through what's going on here before we move over to ClicData to show what's going on, or to walk through it in a demonstration. So we have 2 data sources feeding a merge. So they are being joined here. They are flowing down into a view. And so this merge feeds the view, and this view then also wants some aggregation. So we're bringing in a fusion to aggregate, we're bringing in a data source, we're bringing in a view to aggregate some data, and then that is flowing into a dashboard. And this is probably, some people have simple cases, but for some of us, or some of you on here, you probably have cases like this where it's like a bowl of noodles, like it's just dependencies everywhere, things coming in from all over the place. So let's see what that looks like in ClicData. So just making sure, can everyone still see my screen? Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Anna. So so just like we saw in the presentation there, we have this merge here feeding into that view. And I'm just going to move things around here just so it looks a bit similar to what you just saw in the slide. All right, there we go. Yes. So as you can see, so this is what we had there. So we have this merge feeding into a view. So this is like a table of maybe customer service calls within an organization. And there's some aggregated data that needs to be brought in. So we're, aggregating data from a view, aggregating data from a table, aggregating data from a call, and that's feeding into the view, and that's coming into the dashboard. Okay. So, like I said before, we have all these different assets here. We have a view, we have a merge, we have a fusion, we have a direct data source, and we have yet another view. So again, this is not like a one-to-one transition. Like what ideally we want to do is that we want to move our whole ETL pipeline into the data flow. So like I said before, and as a quick reminder, highly recommend that you move the last assets before your dashboard. So this is the view that finally feeds into this dashboard. So this is what I'm going to migrate on here. Right. So I'm going to come in here, and that view being spoken about, that view is the view we have here, the calls, the aggregated calls view. So I'm going to come in here like we did before, and I'm going to say add to data flow. Okay. I'm going to go into the folders I created for that, and I'm going to add new. And just like before, it names the data flow a similar name to the view you're trying to migrate. So the calls aggregated view there, and then I'm going to save that. Okay, and that brings us in here. Wonderful. So quickly, let's review what's happening here. So we have the merge. So this was the merge that fed into the view. That merge is being brought in as an input node here. So there was no issue with that. We see the two data sources that were used in that merge in here. If I click on that, and now we have this group of aggregations. So these are the aggregations that are showing up within the view, right? So if I go into the view here, just to show you an example of that. So this view has 3 aggregations, and these aggregations, so one aggregation is coming from the data source, one aggregation is coming from the other fusion, one aggregation is coming from the view, right? And so those 3 aggregations are what we see in here. So the aggregation that came directly from the data source, that doesn't have an issue. So the data source is imported into the data flow, that aggregation is done here. But then you see these 2 flags here. So now let's look into what's going on here and try to resolve that if we can. Okay, so we'll start with this. So the call table here, so this is the call table basic view. That's the view that was brought in to that's the view that was brought into the other view to do the aggregations. And it has a flag here because it has its own chain of dependencies. So how can we resolve this? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that connection. There's a little icon at the top here which says imports one or multiple data sources. So I'm going to come in here and I want to import the call table basic view. So I'm going to click on import and I'm going to search call table basic view. Yeah, and so that's the call table basic view right there. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to select it. Great. So what happens here is that call table basic view is imported. So this is the data source. These are the transformations that went out into that view, and that's being outputted here. So this call table view that was brought in here, this is what's going on inside that view, and that's brought into the data flow. So now I can delete that output, and then I'm going to drag the output of that into our aggregation here. And then I can get rid of that. Okay. And now I just want to fix the flag on here. So the aggregator table is the output from this calculated columns 1. I'm going to click on that. And the flag is gone. Okay. So now for the second flag here, let's take a look at that. So if I click on this node, I'm going to see here. So what's happening here is, again, we had a fusion coming in that was being aggregated. So this is the call table fused fusion. And you can see that we named it there just, to have a better idea of what's going on. But so that's the call table fused fusion. And so we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to import. This is my call table fused. And I'm going to check and bring that in. Okay. And now that is brought into the data flow as an input node. And I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to have this feed into that aggregation there. Okay. And now I have a flag on the aggregation here. I want to see what's going on there. And you just have to tell this aggregation that this is what's coming in. So this is the call table fused, feeding in there, and then the flag has disappeared. And so now we have migrated our whole chain of dependencies there. So if I go back to my tables and views here and see that, so this is a view that we're migrating, view the dependencies. Yes. So essentially all those the views, the mergers, the fusions, everything that is coming into this view, which feeds into this dashboard, have now been migrated into this data flow. And just like we did before, I'm going to enable the output table. I am going to select the folders which I predefined there. And these folders are a good way to stay organized as well. And then I'm just going to name that a similar name there, just so I stay organized as well. So I'm going to name that C2 close. And I'm just going to give it a suffix of data flow out. So I know that that's the output from the data flow I created here. Okay. And I am going to save that. And I am going to run. Okay. Save and execute. Okay. And, you know, like we saw before, the wheels on the bus go round and round. It does its thing on the back end, and we have our output. So quick sanity check here. 10,000 rows was the output of this. And if I come back to my call and tables views here, calls and table, or my tables and views menu here, I see the data flow outputs, and it's 10,000 rows. It matches that. And then if you need to, you can use the table replacer like we did in the previous example and replace the downstream of that. Okay, now, finally.
So Lotta, sorry, can I just give you some idea on the time here? We are running very short on time, so maybe for the third case, if you can not go through the whole flow, but just show the result.
Yes, thank you.
It's going to be very clear already with everything you have already explained before.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Anna. Okay, so finally for the third case here, I will just quickly go through, just in the interest of time, so I'll just quickly go through it and walk through it. But similar issue like we saw in the previous one is a lot of complex dependencies here. In this case, we have a merge, two views coming in with their own dependencies and a data source coming into that merge. So this merge has 3 inputs total, and that feeds into a view and into a dashboard. So let's quickly go into ClicData and see what that looks like. Okay. All right. So this is what the output, this is what the final output would look like. Right. I can define the output table there just like we did before. But essentially, we're recreating that merge, having the 2 joins there, feeding it to the output, and I can define the output table. It looks like we're having some connection issues here. So I'm having the wheels spinning right here.
Yeah, we have it too.
But what I could do is, we could have this recorded and put in the final recording of the webinar. But essentially, what goes on at the very end is similar to what you saw before. I recreate the merge with the 2 joins, and I recreate the merge with the 2 joins, feed it to an output table, and then replace that output table to the dashboard, and we have our end result. So I'm just going to hand over back to Anna. I apologize for the connection issues there. So that's why we have the spinning screen there, but we'll record that for the future.
No worries. We had kind of thought it would happen maybe, so all good.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you very much, Lotta. I think it was very clear how you explained everything. I hope it has been clear for everyone of you watching here. So now you have seen a few examples of how to do the conversion, the import, etc. Of course, the other option is just to build your data flow from scratch. You don't need to import everything, right? You can also just rebuild like you want, and maybe that's also the option and a good time to just reorganize your data and processing and optimize things. So it's really up to you. I mean, these tools are here to help you if you want, and if not, then you can also find your own way to do the work. So if we can help you. If you want, we can help you. So we have different resources which are available in our help center. You can get familiar with data flow if it's not familiar to you yet. We have a lot of webinars, videos on our YouTube channel. We also have a help center section completely dedicated to data flow, where you can also see node by node how they work and with videos, etc. And you see, it's actually very simple to get in hand. It's very intuitive and nice and fun to work with. And then about the conversion and the migration to data flow. We have a lot of tips as well in our FAQ section in the Help Center. We have a how-to video, which shows a little bit what we've seen today, but with other example. And then, of course, the webinar that we are currently recording that you can also watch. And yeah, and then also, if you want, we can help you with our services team. We can assist you in any aspect of the conversion. So don't be afraid to ask for help if you need. We'll be happy to work with you on this. We thank you all for joining us today, and we wish you a happy day.